What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another edition of Watching the Meta, the weekly series where we take a look at all of the events that happened on Magic Online over the weekend, and we put them into little funky graphs. And also, we take a look at some sweet decks that maybe you were not expecting. Before we continue, let's take a quick word from our sponsor today, CoolStuffInc.com. This video is brought to you by CoolStuffInc.com. Need some singles for that upcoming RCQ? Cool Stuff has got you covered. Be sure to use promo code DOOM at checkout for 5% off of your next order and this really awesome exclusive Doomwake Rhino token. Unfortunately, maybe not going to get so much use out of it nowadays without Crushing Footfalls in Modern, but it is still a really sweet token. Cool Stuff is also now offering full service selling. No sorting required. Take your collection, ship it over to Cool Stuff, no fees, fast payment. If you need cash fast for the holiday shopping season, Cool Stuff has got you covered. Send us your cards, we'll do the rest. And we are back. We'll start off today's episode, as we always do, with Modern, and I gotta be honest with you, it's not really getting any better. So you could see last week, Boros Energy was clocking in at 28%. This week, it's up to 35%. And if you want to include Mardu in there, 40% of the metagame is energy. I will just say, next Monday can't come soon enough. I just posted a video this past Saturday with my thoughts on the upcoming ban list, what I think should, maybe could happen, not necessarily what will happen, because a lot of times what should happen and what they want to happen do not necessarily line up, as we've seen in previous Wizards of the Coast ban announcements. But with all that said, the metagame is what it is for right now. Hopefully we don't have to play this format too much longer. I'm not going to spend too much time on this graph, but what I will spend time on is 3 really sweet decks that I found from the weekend, which potentially might be on your radar after next Monday. Before we take a look at deck lists real quick, I just wanted to highlight there were 8 challenges that were recorded in this particular set of data. 5 of them were won by, you guessed it, Boros Energy, 1 by Dimir Oculus, 1 from Amulet Storm, and last but not least, 1 by Ruby Storm. So, about those sweet deck lists that I had for you. We are going to start off with Dragon Fodder, which frequent viewers of this series may recognize that name from a couple of episodes prior. They do generally tend to cook a little bit in Modern, which I can appreciate. And what we have here is a Grixis Lightning Skelemental deck. So Lightning Skelemental is a pretty powerful card, 6/1 trample, you have to sack it end of turn, but when it hits them, that player discards 2 cards. So you're pairing this with ways to return it from the graveyard. Decks like this in the past have played Chthonian Nightmare. There are no copies here, but we are splashing a third color in the form of blue for a couple of cards here. So we have Founding the Third Path, Tainted Indulgence, and then I believe there was some sideboard counter spells, if I recall correctly. No, actually, no sideboard counter spells. So really just splashing for Tainted Indulgence and Founding the Third Path, which is kind of interesting. I guess there is also Wonder here, which is nice because if you find Wonder, then your Lightning Skelementals and Netherglyphs have flying, which means they're harder to block. They might be able to push a little bit more damage. You kind of have the general Delirium shell of Channeler, Bauble, couple Unholy Heats. And then another card that's very cool to pair with Lightning Skelemental is Flare of Malice, because you attack with the Skelemental. They probably don't want to block it because it's going to die anyways, so they're not going to trade for it in combat. They take the hit, they discard 2 cards, and then you can use the Flare to sacrifice the Skelemental to make them sacrifice a creature. So pretty cool take on the Skelemental Unearth deck, which I know Dragon Fodder has been putting a ton of work into, and some things to look out for after next Monday. Next up, from Pikachu is My Companion, who we did actually shout out last week. Another sweet deck list here from Pikachu is My Companion. I wish Pikachu was my companion. Let me know in the comments, what Pokemon would be your companion? I want to hear your guys' thoughts. But in any case, Pikachu has provided us today a Mardu Sacrifice deck, which is kind of interesting, where you're utilizing stuff like Cruel Celebrant, which says whenever it or another creature you control dies, your opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. Stuff like Mayhem Devil and Marionette Apprentice, so a lot of ways to drain your opponent out. Sacrifice outlets in the form of, you have a Greater Gargadon here, but mostly the sacrificing is coming from Goblin Bombardment, which is interesting because it's a sacrifice outlet that doesn't die to removal spells, namely Discharge, Bolt, all that kind of stuff. You do still have the energy package of Guide of Souls, Ocelot Pride, and Ajani, mostly because that is just the easiest way to get a bunch of bodies in the battlefield. And then, yeah, I mean, we're pairing that with Amtraptor. So actually, the more I look at this deck, it's kind of Boros Energy disguised as Mardu Sacrifice. But in any case, still a pretty interesting take on the archetype. I would say watch out for this one next week, but I think there's a good chance that maybe one of the cards from this deck probably will not be legal after next Monday. And then lastly here from What Up, we have Mono Green Shifting Woodland. So I've seen variations of this Shifting Woodland Omniscience deck where your whole goal is to put Omniscience in the graveyard and Shifting Woodland to copy it. But there's some interesting tech cards here where notably we're only mono green, so we're not playing a second color for anything like counter spells, and I've seen Oracle of Tragedy, Falahi Archaeologist, none of that stuff. We're just mono green. Endurance, Archdruid's Charm to help go fetch the Shifting Woodland, Cash Grab to find it, Rumble the same thing, and then our big payoffs is like Karn the Great Creator. Look, probably not going to get to play this one next week either, but it's really hard to find a deck that doesn't have the One Ring or Gaddis Souls in it, all right? Don't at me. What I wanted to highlight here was these one-ups. You have Elder Gargaroth, Gristlebrand, Questing Beast, and Tarmogoyf, which is kind of funny to see that lineup of creatures here, but it is some Traverse / Archdruid Charm tutor targets. Questing Beast good against the Ring, Gristlebrand good with Shifting Woodland, so on and so forth. So there's some interesting tutor targets here, just something to keep in mind. Although, again, probably not going to get to play this one after next week. But in any case, speaking of next week, I will certainly be doing a video on the ban list announcement, so be on the lookout for that when it is available. But that's Modern. Let's take a look at Pioneer next. So Pioneer's in a bit of a weird spot, where if you look at this graph, and you kind of go week to week and see how the metagame is evolving and changing and adapting, it's all over the place. It's very strange to me that it feels like Pioneer right now is the most wide open format that nobody cares about. They removed Pioneer from the RCQ season rotation. They don't really give people a reason to play Pioneer. I guess there's Pioneer Masters coming out, but even then, I had this realization the other day. I'm going to go on a small tangent here. I wanted to play Metalwork Colossus because Leyline Axe is a card from Foundations that boosted the Colossus archetype. I wanted to play it on Arena. I assumed Sanctum of Ugin was going to be on the client either already or in Pioneer Masters. It's not the case. So even with Pioneer Masters coming to Arena, there's still some decks that we can't play, which is unfortunate. And it just seems like they just really don't care that much about Pioneer anymore, which is sad because this metagame is shifting. I mean, look at last week. Jund Creativity is taking a big dip from last week. The most played deck last week, Rakdos Prowess, took a dip. Rakdos Demons took a big uptick. Spirits fluctuating. There's so many things and so many moving parts about Pioneer, and it's very diverse. And I think for the most part, the games are kind of interesting. I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts because this used to be a very Pioneer-focused channel, although with their move and their decision to remove Pioneer from the rotation, I've wanted to shift my content focus more towards Standard. But for people out there who still play Pioneer, are you enjoying the format? Is it still fun for you? I would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comment section, so let me know. But even though Pioneer maybe doesn't have any competitive support, there's still some really sweet deck lists that are cooking up, and I want to showcase a couple of those right now. Real quick, before we move on to the deck list, there was 5 challenges and a showcase. The showcase was won by Blue-White Humans, and then the other remaining 5 challenges were won by Rakdos Demons twice, Rakdos Prowess, 5-color Zur, and Blue-White Control. So, with regards to those sweet deck lists that I promised you, the first one I want to take a look at is from Mitch and some numbers, 4783. Now, we've seen variations of this mono red. I had it labeled as mono red Osier, but then I realized there's no Osiers in the deck. They've been removed for, well, the Torbrands were there before, but basically the idea is you're playing a bunch of red cards that deal your opponent 1 damage. Okay. So 1 or 2 damage. So Eidolon of the Great Revel, Hired Claw, Ferocidon, Needlehead, and Kumano Faces Kakazan, along with Leyline of Combustion as well. So all of these cards deal some chip damage to your opponent. Well, if you have Torbrand in play, every time you have one of those cards that deals chip damage, it turns into a lot more than chip damage. And the idea before was that you had Torbrand and Osier Axonil, which is not in this deck list, but hopefully my editor can put it on the screen for you guys, to kind of come to sort of supplement the Torbrands. Those have been removed. We're actually doing a light green splash here too for Paw Patch formation alongside Destructive Revelry. And then main deck Urabrask's Forge, 22 lands, 2 Frenzy, 2 Torch, 4 Leylines, 4 Kumanos. It looks like a pretty interesting deck, and I'm curious to see if maybe this becomes a player in the format. But the combination of Torbrand with all of these cards that ping, specifically stuff like Hired Claw and Razorkin Needlehead, can deal a lot of damage. Next up, the Fire God in 30th place. We've seen some variations on this Fecund Green Shell deck before. Most of them were from user, I believe it's LAA211. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's their username. You could probably go find some deck lists from them. But this one is a slightly different take. So first of all, you'll notice deck size is a bit smaller. Usually they're 80 cards with Yorion, but this particular individual has decided to slim down to 60, remove our beloved Sky Noodle from the equation. We're still playing a lot of the same shell, though, so we still have the green shells and the Glasspool Mimics to copy them. We still have geese and grazers to help trigger the green shells for cheap, along with the Spelunkings. We've included Risen Reefs, which I don't believe were in the deck before, but make a lot of sense because they, again, let you keep going. Good with Spelunking. The idea is to just get a green shell or 2 into play a bunch of 1-mana cards that put lands into play, and then you can use that mana because with Spelunking, the lands come into play untapped. And then eventually you can like loot to find green shell. You can just Sire of 7 Deaths and just cast a bunch of stuff. No actual way to kill, I believe, the turn that you put all that stuff into play, but you can just assemble a massive board, pass with a counterspell or 2 up, and that's probably good enough. So interesting take on the green shell archetype, and I feel like just in general an archetype that is relatively underexplored. Had to give a quick shout out to Yellow Hat, aka Gabe Nassif, aka Bob the Dog, in 18th place. Blue-black control with 4 Narset and 4 Days Undoing. Gab has been spending a lot of time on these blue-black control decks, and I normally, if you're a follower and a fan of this channel, you probably know that I really don't like playing control decks. But this one actually looks kind of cool, because you're pairing Narset, Notion Thief, and Shieldred with both Days Undoing and Quicken to do it on their turn. What's really interesting to me about this deck list is the Quickens, because normally Days Undoing plus Shieldred doesn't work, because Days Undoing says if it's your turn, end the turn, so you wouldn't actually get to put the Shelly triggers onto the stack. But if you Quicken the Days Undoing on their turn, well, if it's their turn, it can't be your turn, so they would take the damage there, which is kind of interesting. So yeah, really cool looking deck list. Again, not necessarily a big fan of these decks, but Bob the Dog can certainly make a control deck. And last up here from Niku in 23rd place, I wanted to highlight this one as a slightly interesting take on the very popular Ninjas deck that's been popping up. So we have less Ninjas in this one. This almost looks like more of a standard deck, where we've removed the Moon Circuit Hackers and things like that, no Ornithopters. We still have Prosperous Thief, which this one specifically is interesting, because this one, whenever a ninja or rogue hits your opponent, you make a treasure. And as it turns out, treasures are pretty good fuel for Rottenmouth Viper, where you can still, turn 1, you have the Mockingbirds, the Miscreants, and the Spyglass Siren. Also, Siren, 2 permanents for Viper. So you can start copying Siren with Mockingbird and then use that for more fodder for Rottenmouth Viper. So a lot of cool stuff going on here. Still have a bunch of 1-drops to pick up Kaido. I almost even want to see more Rottenmouth Vipers in this deck list. So interesting take on the Ninjas deck if that is something that you are into. And with all of that out of the way, let us get to currently my favorite format, Standard. If you've been watching this channel for the past couple of weeks, you know that I have really just kind of been all in on Standard at this point. It is the most supported competitive format outlet for WotC with regards to RCQs and just upcoming RCQ seasons, things like that. It is, I believe, the most diverse format right now, the most fun. The gameplay is really good. I cannot say enough good things about Standard. If you are looking to get into Standard, I would highly, highly recommend it. Now, this particular chart maybe doesn't paint the most accurate picture, because again, this is Magic Online data. There's only 5 challenges here. Or I should say, no, there's 4, was it 4 challenges and a showcase? Let me just double check here, because I believe the showcase was this weekend. Yes, this is 4 challenges and a showcase. Dimir midrange, 27.5%, up a little bit from last week, from 21. Golgari mid took a huge downtick. Basically, that 8% of Dimir players probably just decided to remove the blue for green this week. Or opposite, remove the green for blue. I'm having a hard time this morning. It's fine. Mono red took a bit of a dip here from 10 to 7. Mono white stayed about the same. Overlord's about the same. Roughly everything else about the same. But I do want to point out two big things here. Gruul Prowess from 3.1 to 7.5. And also Jeskai Convoke, which I believe was not even on the list last week, 9.4% this week. So that is a bit of a statement. And I have heard some rumblings about people saying Convoke being in a really good spot right now, which I kind of tend to agree with. People, for the most part, if you look at a lot of these green-black and blue-black sideboards, they don't really have any 3-mana sweepers anymore. Good luck beating a Gleeful Demolition with a Gix's Command on turn 5. You're going to be dead by that. So I think Jeskai Convoke, depending on how people adapt their sideboards, could be in a good spot, maybe even upcoming for Atlanta. So that's the metagame. The challenges, there were 5 of them. Again, four regular challenges, 1 showcase. The showcase was won by Dimir Midrange, and then the other 4 challenges were 2 Dimir Midrange, 1 Jeskai Convoke, 1 Mono Red. With all that out of the way, I got a couple of sweet decks for you. The first one I wanted to highlight from Cygnus, who top-aided a challenge this weekend with Celestia Cookies. Now, I want to shout out to Ash Lizzle, because I know that she has put a ton of work into this deck. So if you want to check out the evolution of the Cookies archetype, I'm sure she has plenty of videos on it. You can go check out her content. I don't believe this is her current list. Somebody can let me in the comment sections. No, I was going to go check on her current list, but I didn't have time before this video. But what's interesting to me is a card that I have not seen in this archetype before is Splitskin Doll, which might seem out of place, but it's an artifact, so it has some synergies there with stuff like Tough Cookie, and I guess it doesn't really synergize with Cookie that much, but you can sacrifice it to Reliquary. Specifically, the most important interaction for Doll seems to be it triggers Teething Wormwood, but it's an artifact that replaces itself that you can sacrifice to Reliquary. So you have more redundancy on that, right? You have Novice Inspector, which gets you a permanent, the Tough Cookie, which you can sack the food, keep the cookie around. Now you have this, which already got you a card if you have another small creature in play, and you don't mind sacrificing it to the Dusk Rose Reliquary. But yeah, that was kind of just what I wanted to highlight here as a version of this deck that I had not seen before and looks kind of interesting. I think that this is a good approach to the kind of Novice Inspector, Regal Bunnicorn, Steel Seraph decks that I've been spending a lot of time on blue-white, but maybe green-white's a better option. I also am wondering about Leyline Axe in this deck, because Axe on Bunnicorn is a really good interaction. Axe on Sentinel is kind of nice because you can play defense with your 4/5 double strike. Seems kind of hard to attack into that thing. As far as the other green cards, like Axe on Wormlet is kind of nice because Wormlet gets Death Touch, Double Strike, Trample, Death Touch, pretty good abilities. So maybe something worth considering. We have another top 8 appearance, or I guess I should say another top 8 shoutout here for Angry Chicken in 7th place. Another deck that Ash Lizzle had spent some time on, I believe, and we actually tried a little bit of this as well. I think there might have been a video for it on the channel a couple of weeks prior. But this is Urborg Scavengers, where basically, whenever it enters or attacks, you exile a card from a graveyard, put a counter on the Scavengers, and then the Scavengers has all abilities, keyword abilities, not activated or triggered abilities, keyword abilities of the cards that you exile. So, Atraxa, Flying, Vigilance, Death Touch, Lifelink, Zetalpa, Flying, Double Strike, Vigilance, Trample, Indestructible. Those are the abilities that you get to put onto your Scavengers. So, if you have Zetalpa in the graveyard, you pay 3 mana for a 3/3 that has these 5 abilities. That's pretty good rate. Now, decks like this in the past, I say in the past, a couple of weeks ago, we're playing Sire of 7 Deaths. And what I wanted to highlight about this version specifically is we're moving away from Sire and we're just playing more Atraxas. And I think I like that a lot. Now, the reason for that is because your backup plan is just zombify a big thing. And sure, zombifying a Sire of 7 Deaths is not bad because they have to pay 7 life to kill it, but you'd much rather put an Atraxa into play and draw 4 or 5 cards. So I think I like that change. Vangel of Synthesis, nice way to fill out the curve and just smooth out, get Zetalpa into the graveyard. Same thing with Kiora. Overlord of the Bailmerk is fantastic here because it mills cards, but also can pick up your Scavengers. So that's kind of nice. But yeah, just a slightly interesting and different take on the Urborg Scavengers archetype that looks kind of cool. Next up here from Tulio Jotty, 20th place. This is Blue-Black Reanimator, but with a bit of a twist. Now, Enigma Jewel is near and dear to my heart. I've tried to play that card way too many times, and I cannot begin to explain to you how many play points and gems that I may have lost from Jewel. But in any case, this is Enigma Jewel Reanimator. So you're pairing it with Collector's Vault because Collector's Vault has a 2-mana activated ability. Draw, discard, make treasures. Discarding is powerful because you're playing Zombifies. And also just making treasures lets you hardcast stuff like Tatraxa, Valgavoth, Terror Eater, Harvester of Misery, things like that. 4 Shieldred, which might seem like a lot and might hurt the budget a little bit, but Shieldred is very important when you're playing this Collector's Vault Maze Mind Tome Jewel engine because you have so many ways to draw cards, so gains you a ton of life against the red decks. The other thing that I really want to highlight here that a lot of people seem to miss is that Valgavoth's Faithful has an activated ability, which means that you can use Enigma Jewel to activate Faithful. So I honestly could even see playing more copies of this card because of that, maybe leaning a bit more on the reanimation, maybe some more discard outlets, maybe some more of these, more large creatures, who knows. But just, I wanted to highlight this. And also 4 Fomori Vault, which again, might seem like a lot, but it is a discard outlet that has an activated ability. You see where this is going. But yeah, really cool take on the Enigma Jewel Reanimator archetype, and shout out to Tulio for creating a banger. All right, last Reanimator deck. I promise this is the last deck of the video, so it's got to be the last Reanimator deck. Arcbound Poppy. I don't know, man. I'm addicted to Zombify, okay? What can I say? This one I wanted to highlight because it is using an interaction that I have not seen a ton before, which is Beseech the Mirror. Now, you might say to yourself, well, Beseech the Mirror doesn't have a ton of fodder. You have Bitter Reunion, I guess, but there's no artifacts. Well, if you take a look in the mana base, there is 4 copies of Valgavoth's Lair. Now, I'm not saying that playing 4 Enter the Battlefield tap lands is a good strategy, but when they're enabling Beseech the Mirror, it gets a little bit more appealing, which is interesting. Where you can go, say, turn 1 Lair, maybe turn 2 Bitter Triumph, discard your Valgavoth, and then turn 4 you have Beseech, you can sack the Lair, go get Zombify the Valgavoth. Now, you do have stuff like Fear of Missing Out and Bitter Reunion, so I'm not even necessarily convinced that you need all 4 layers. I feel like maybe 4 is a bit excessive, but I do like at least having a couple in the mana base to be able to set up Beseech, similar to what we did with Splitskin Doll and Scrapwork Mutt in the Orzhov version, with using those for Beseech fodder. And that is going to do it for another episode of Watching the Meta. Again, seriously, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know in the comments section down below. I'm really just trying to improve this series week to week. Is there anything that you want to see? I saw some comments last week about maybe showcasing the winners. I feel like it was not necessary to do that in Modern, at least, because 5 of them were Boros decks, but again, let me know in the comment section below if you guys have any ideas for maybe some ways we can improve this weekly series, because I'm going to keep it going. It seems like you guys enjoy it so far. So again, seriously, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I will see you all in the next one. Adios.